My skill set kind of is telling the story of other people who are using their skills to do amazing things. That's kind of what I do all the time. And some of those amazing people are here today, so I thought I'd start by introducing them. Danny and there's Danny. Where's Tiffany? And there's Tiffany. Danny is an amazing developer. Tiffany is a totally impressive designer who've come to the city for the year and been working on a wide variety of projects, including the Open Data Portal, which if I don't mention 6 or 7 times in this talk, I have failed, or working on the Open Data Policy. So they've taken a year out of their lives and dedicated it to this notion that we can make government work better. They're not the only ones. Jill and Jim lead up the Code for America Brigade here in Charlotte, Code for Charlotte. They have a table outside the door and right there. I hope by the end of this talk that you will feel absolutely compelled, if you live anywhere near Charlotte, to be a part of this amazing team. They are only about 8 months old, have about 12 projects going that will blow your mind, and are just having a huge impact here. And I believe at some point we'll have some folks from the city of Charlotte. These are only 2 of the folks that Danny and Tiffany and Jim and Jill have been working with over the year. Jim Stovall isn't mentioned here, the CIO, but he's also been very involved. This is Twyla McDermott and Tom Warschauer. And they are very much part of this story. This isn't just a story of tech people giving their time. This is a story of government opening up and bringing this in and making it better because we're doing it together. So Berman asked me to talk about the future of interfaces to government, which is not how I have been talking about this recently. I think it was a good frame, but let me start with some of the interfaces to government that you might recognize. This is a pretty good one. It works. It's right there, usually at the place where you're parking your car, telling you that the 3rd Wednesday you can't do it. The only problem is, of course, sometimes if you park your car on the 1st Monday, you sometimes don't remember when the 3rd Wednesday is, so you get something like this, a ticket, which is another interface to government. Another one is being towed, which is a kind of a user experience fail. And it happens a lot because people don't remember when the 3rd Wednesday is, and there's better ways to do that. Here is an interface to, I would call it politics, actually, not government, but how we elect our officials. On the left, you see what one of our fellows, Molly McLeod, got, and she was so frustrated she redesigned it, and it's a lot clearer over there on the right how to actually vote. We see a lot of problems in this territory. Remember when George Bush and Al Gore were facing off, and there was a very confusing interface. It was not clear exactly which Chad you were supposed to poke at, and kind of disrupted the country for several weeks there. But interfaces like this, which I guess I'm not sure that's technically an interface, but when you think about your experience with government, most people just go straight to this. Standing in line somewhere, being pretty frustrated. And the problem that we're facing right now is a kind of sort of the Uber versus DMV problem. Maybe Uber in the end will get us all to stop driving completely, which would be great. I know I have started driving a lot less, using public transit more because I know when the bus is going, when in our case the BART in the Bay Area is going to be there, means you have more confidence in it, which is another interface to government data. But and taking Uber when I don't need to do that. But in the meantime, we're still going to the DMV and having an experience like this in our interactions with government, where in other parts of our lives, you have that Uber experience or that Google experience where your phone is telling you what you need to know, is making things unbelievably convenient, getting you the data that you need exactly when you need it, and you don't have to do anything for it. My phone starts telling me things about where I need to be when. I didn't ask it to do that. It's sort of bossing me around, but it's functionality that I get for free. And the problem is that the bar is going up every day. I loved, by the way, Berman, using Uber for Business to get here. It was like, without me even doing anything, my expectation bar goes up all the time, which means the government with lines like this, even if it's staying steady, not getting worse, looks worse on its own. all the time. And that has really led to something fundamental, which is it's not just the inconvenience. When that bar keeps separating, we have an erosion of trust and faith in government. And that is not an okay place to be in my book. That's kind of where we've been, this gap in user experience that's eroding our willingness to do things together. And at the end of the day, that's what government is. It's just a way that we do things together. But last year, I took a year off from Code for America, took a leave of absence, and I spent it working in the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy as the deputy CTO. And I happened to be there when this happened. We tried to launch a website that could enroll you in healthcare, and it didn't work. And it was front page news for a long time. Unfortunately, in the beginning of this whole experience, I was furloughed. I was back out in California, unable to do anything about this site not working for about 2.5 weeks, which was really frustrating. But I got very attuned to the news cycle then, to the point where I was sort of like worked up every moment. I was looking for the news and seeing what people were saying about this. So I may be slightly overreacting to this, but one of my favorite periodicals had this on the cover. That's Kathleen Sebelius just crossing her fingers and hoping that this will work. But I think we crossed a line into something beyond erosion of trust and faith in government with healthcare.gov. It's not just that this was one of the the leading policy initiative of a presidential administration that was potentially going to fall apart after years and years of fighting. Whether you believe in that the legislation was the right one or not, I think the anxiety that our culture was expressing over healthcare.gov on the front pages of of every newspaper for many, many months was beyond that. It was really people going, wait a minute, whether I believed in that law or not, we're at the point where we can't implement the laws and policies that we pass. And there is a fundamental anxiety that comes with that, that I think crosses any political viewpoints. Mike Bracken, who runs the government digital service in the UK, can you raise your hand if you've heard of gov.uk or the government digital service? Berman, you have to have these guys here for the conference one year. They've done amazing work, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But Mike said it perfectly when he came to visit. Unfortunately, he came to visit the day after the government shutdown ended, and it was absolutely crazy in DC. But he spoke to the Presidential Innovation Fellows that I was working with. He said, this isn't a policy option, it's a delivery crisis. And I think that's exactly right. So I worked for the guy, Todd Park, who was the CTO of the country. He unfortunately just changed jobs recently, which is, I think, it's great that he's staying with the administration. He's a truly remarkable, wonderful human being. As head of that part of the Office of Science and Technology Policy, we were really not actually supposed to do anything about delivery. We were on the policy side. But the president really trusted him, and when the site went down, he disappeared for a long time and was working about 22 hours a day. I'm actually not entirely exaggerating when I say that. To get the site back up, bringing an incredible team together who also worked like absolute heroes to at least duct tape that site through the enrollment period, and ended up enrolling 8.2 million people, more people than we even thought they could do before the site failed, which is truly remarkable. And it speaks to the kind of sacrifice that you see people doing in public service, and I hope everyone here who's not thought about the way your public servants sacrifice for you would think about that a little bit. But the point is, Todd sort of disappeared for a while. He surfaced for a couple days and came back and said, I need to send you on another mission. And the Domestic Policy Council has realized that if this is going to happen to our healthcare initiative, all of the other presidential priorities are probably vulnerable too. And he said, will you please go work with citizenship and immigration? Because if comprehensive immigration reform passes, and that also fails in implementation, we're really up Schitt's Creek. So I went and started on a couple different projects with them that were going to have to take a much bigger hit, or at least, I guess, handle a lot more users if immigration reform passes. One of them was this program called E-Verify. And I think when the White House sent me over there to sort of start poking around and seeing what was working and not working over there, they had in their mind kind of what the situation appeared to be those first couple of days when healthcare.gov was down, which is something along the lines of, they probably need more servers. right? That's probably what's wrong. E-Verify is a program that is currently optional. If you're an employer and you would like to make sure that the people you're hiring are legally allowed to work, then you enroll in this program and then you're easily able to check them, name and social security number. It's actually not a very complicated program at all. In the back end, it's looking up a lot of data, so it's not simple in that way, but the user experience of it should be pretty simple. This is something that will become mandatory should immigration reform pass. I'm not trying to get into much politics here. Really, this is a user experience issue, which means that like currently it's mostly large companies that have an HR staff that are using this. But when I'd say immigration reform passes, every taco truck, every nail salon, every self-employed person doing web design or home decoration is going to have to use this system, and it gets a little complicated. I did a teardown, and I decided not to put it in because it takes a long time. It's kind of depressing to like walk through the process. But it's the requirements that we put on this really simple system, like the fact that you have to sign, let's see which slide this is in. You have to sign a really long, it's like a 7-page E-Verify memorandum of understanding before you can even use the system. It's written in terrifying legal language that I don't understand. There's a number of steps of it into it. You have to enroll in E-Verify and watch a video about how to enroll in it. It shouldn't be that hard. And then you start thinking about, oh yeah, you probably are going to need more servers because you're going to make every taco truck and nail salon watch a damn video, and this is government, so we can't put it up on YouTube. You're going to have to serve those videos. And you see how this starts to be not a problem of technology, but a problem of an experience design that is completely committee-driven. Everybody can add something to it. Nobody can take anything out of it. There are links that go back to the same page that you're on. And you go, yes, a lot of them actually. And you look at something like this and you say, this is not just a delivery crisis, this is a user experience crisis. Now, the experience with healthcare.gov also drew something out that has become very important to us at Code for America. And it's the realization that one of the other reasons healthcare.gov was on the front page of the paper for so long was that the middle class had to use this interface to government. But if you know anything about the services that we provide, the poor have to go through stuff like that all the time. And it's sort of become a bit of a social justice issue. We knew that at Code for America because in 2012 and 2013, we started working in social services. This is a notice that you get when you have enrolled in Supplemental Nutrition Assistance, the SNAP program. It may be more familiar to you as food stamps. But one of the things that the Code for America Fellows that were working on this problem found is that most of the people who sign up for SNAP in the first couple of months get dropped off the rolls. And it's because they got notices like this. And let me see if I can't know if I can read to you this really very well. It goes on. I promise I won't read you the whole thing, but it's things like, your food stamp benefits in this quarter did not change as a result of the documents information we received because it would not have resulted in an increase in benefits. Your food stamp benefits in this quarter did not change as a result of the document information we received because the new rule says when you report some changes, the county cannot lower your food stamps until the next quarter. I could keep reading. I'm not going to. But you get, again, that's like this whole thing says stuff like that. You can read these things. You have no idea what they mean. So these Code for America Fellows, it was their job to sign up for this program, get all the notices, and try to stay enrolled, and even they could not do it. So the problem that was presented to them is the cost of this churn as people fall off the rolls and then you have to reapply is really high, right? You're having people go through that same process again. You're having people process that paperwork again. And that is a really big problem. If you're a taxpayer, you should care about that problem. But the problem they were really tuned into was the following. When you think that your EBT card has been recharged, what do? And the data shows this. You go straight to the grocery store because it means you probably haven't fed your family that week. And if you go to the grocery store and you buy all your groceries and you're standing at the front of the counter and you run that EBT card and it says denied because you didn't fill out one of these forms and you didn't know that you've been dropped, it's not good. The people behind you in line are pissed. They're going, what's wrong with that person who can't pay, who can't pay for their groceries? You're humiliated, and you go home and there's no food for your family. And this is not okay. Doesn't need to be this way. We spend a lot of money on this program, and we should not be getting that outcome. And so the fellows that were working on this program tried a whole bunch of different things. The process that we use at Code for America is extremely iterative. We don't necessarily think we know the solution when we start out. You can talk to Danny and Tiffany about that. But they came up with a pretty simple solution, which is they started collecting phone numbers. A lot of people obviously don't have access to the web, so they're not able to figure that out through a website, but they could text message them. Your CalFresh benefits may stop at the end of this month. If you have questions, call this number. And they reduced the churn in that program by 40%. And that's an interface. Thank you. I will pass that applause along to the people who deserve it, who worked very hard to make this a much better interface to government. Thank you. So this is what I mean about what's at stake in better interfaces to government. Here's another example, a team that went to Louisville, Kentucky in, I think it was 2013. The problem they were presented with there is that people are held, when someone's charged generally with a very petty crime, they're held pre-trial at very, very high rates. The data show that you really don't need to hold these people in jail. You can release them, but they're mostly not released. Huge, huge costs. Mayors across the country are going, if you look at the giant, giant line items in their budget, it's pensions and then it's jails, and we do not need all these people to be in jail. So they were looking at how we would use data to make better decisions pre-trial, and so as part of their experience, and I know this is a great selling point for all of you to join Code for America, they went to jail. Marcin was a developer and designer guy from Google who decided to do the program for a year. They got picked up by the Louis Metroville Police Department and running on their cruisers, and then actually had the experience, because this is what they were going to be working on, of being booked into jail so that a record was created about it. They could see what data was collected and where it went and what the user experience was like. And when Marcin came back, he told me the story of literally going into jail. We were taken to a cell. And as he and his two teammates were walking down the corridor to this cell, a guy in another cell on a cot, laying down, said, "Hey, warden, who are your friends?" And the warden said, "Well, these are the Code for America fellows." And the guy jumps up off the cot and says, "Oh my God, I read about you guys in the paper. Can I tell you all the things that are wrong with this system?" And he starts telling them about all the inaccuracies in the data, the way that people, all the mistakes that get made. And it was just remarkable. And Marcin was like, "I cannot believe that I'm doing this." I'm like, I thought I was coming to write code for a year, and I'm like talking to this guy in jail. But you kind of wonder what's wrong with our criminal justice system that the guy who is booked, being held in jail, is excited to see not his lawyer, but the guy who used to Google Doodles. That's what Marcin used to do. There's a lot that is really significantly wrong with the system that we are all financing, by the way, in case that wasn't clear. The citizen experience needs us. This is an article by Sid Harel, who's been with the organization for a couple of years now, who is a UX researcher and has been evangelizing this and helping the fellows and others with UX practices at Code for America. I'm going to borrow from her slides for a second when she's been talking about principles for civic design, and then I'm going to be so bold as to add a couple on my own. But she starts with respect. And maybe you don't need to have that as part of your design principles in the work that you're doing with brands or whoever else. But when you think about that language in the notices that the food stamp enrollees were getting, I read that as a failure of respect. It's well-intentioned, it really is. We're trying to get accurate information. We're trying to make sure we're legally compliant when we do that. But speaking in a language that is, your CalFresh benefits may end, please call us, is a way of showing respect by communicating clearly. And our second one is participation. And I'd like to tell, if I can tell it quickly, a couple of stories about participation, because we hold very dear this notion that we live in a country that is has a government that is run not only for the people with interfaces that show respect, but by the people. This is a story that happens in Honolulu, where 3 fellows went again in 2012, and they were asked to look at the Honolulu's website. Now, there was something like 30 or 40,000 pages of content on the site. I don't think there was any CMS backing it up. And there was no way that they were going to be able to revamp that website, the 3 of them, in less than a year, which is the time of the Code for America Fellowship. But so they kept saying, let's find another problem to work on. And they kept being brought back to the problem of the Honolulu.gov website. This is how it looked at the time. You can see it starts with government, agencies, the department. The middle is news releases. It's very much what government wants to be telling its citizens. And they said, well, what is it that people in Honolulu actually come to the site to find out? What are people looking for when they go there? So they started with the data, which is another principle of Code for America. They said, okay, what are people searching for? Turned out the top search term was driver's license. Most of you know that driver's license is handled at the state level, but that's actually not true in Honolulu because 85% of the population of the state lives in one city, so they have a city and county handle that function. So they said, great, let's type driver's licenses into the search on Honolulu.gov, and they would get back a page like this. They would click through, and they would get back a page like this. I love reading. I was going to read and bore you again, but I can't really read it. The type is too small. But you know that it's a lot. There were dozens of pages about driver's licenses that tell you things like that if you are a service person returning from active duty, you have a 90-day grace period before you need to renew it. There was a page all about the new machines that they had bought to make the driver's licenses. What there wasn't was a page that told you how to get a driver's license. So they borrowed from gov.uk, a project I'll talk about in a second, a search-driven interface, very clean and simple. And they wrote up a couple of these answers. So if you type driver's license into this sort of alternate universe of a Honolulu website, wait, which am I? You'd get a page like that. If you click through that third link, you would get a page that tells you where you need to go, what you need to bring, how much it's going to cost, and where to schedule your test online. This is what the citizens of Honolulu need from their website. The problem is they wrote answers to the top 10 questions inherent in those top 10 search terms, and that's not sufficient. If they would not be able to do all the rest of them. So they said, we don't actually need a hackathon here. The tech is fine. What we need, or at least it was a fine start, what we need is a write-a-thon. So they took the next 60 search terms, applied the questions behind those, put them up on a wall in a co-working space outside on a Saturday morning at this place a couple blocks away from City Hall. They invited the community members that they'd met. They invited the people from City Hall that they'd been working with. And a whole bunch of people showed up that day, and they would go over to the wall, take a question, research the answer, write it up in simple, clear terms, have each other edit it. The people from city government would check it to make sure that it was technically accurate. And by the end of the day, they had all of those questions answered in clear, simple language within the Honolulu Answers format. The other thing that happened was they had a really great time, which is something that you probably don't associate with government technology or government websites. But I guarantee if you get involved with your brigade, you will also have a really good time. Jill was saying that there will be cupcakes involved with the next Code for Charlotte meetup, for instance. And this is really important because if people are bonding around an experience that is not about just helping themselves, it's about helping their community. It's about feeling good about not having to complain because you're fixing the problem yourself. This has spread to many, many cities, and as I understand it, there is also soon going to be a Charlotte Answers. But I like to brag about Oakland Answers. I live in Oakland, California, and I contributed to ours on National Day of Civic Hacking last year. I keep chickens, and I want people to know that it is legal. You should not keep roosters. They are not legal, and they are loud and annoying. But this is something that you can do. You don't need to write code. You don't even need to be a designer, as we've covered. I am not, but I can write a simple answer that my fellow Oaklanders need to know about. So we look at a couple of different lessons from this. Interfaces to government can be simple, easy to use. We don't need to just complain. We can not just offer our voices, but offer our hands, and that these solutions can spread really quickly. And the sum total of those lessons are, yes, government is hackable. You just didn't think it was. It's absolutely hackable. But not only are the interfaces to government hackable, but one of the things that the Code for America Fellows have surprised us in doing is showing is that our cities are hackable. It's not just the government. The government is also in charge, as you might have noticed, of things like our physical environment. This is an amazing project that the teams did, I think, again in 2013. That is basically a way that you can plug just a basic web interface where you go on and say, I want to mash up the street that I live on, or any street, the street that and it lets you sort of put in how many lanes, and then you can drop trees and you can change it. You can say, this is how my street looks now, but I want it to look different. I want it to have a dedicated lane for buses. I want it to have trees. I want to have a dedicated lane for bikes. And you can say, let me reimagine my physical environment, and then save these reimaginations and share them with people. It's pretty amazing. And then they've taken it further. Tiffany and Danny and a bunch of others have worked on a truly remarkable thing called Transit Mix that says, you know what, even those transit lines where the buses and subways go, it's not immutable. I guess subways are a little bit more immutable, but we should be able to give feedback. We should be able to reimagine the routes, the transit routes that we take every day. And when we do that, we can design them, we can redesign them in the city, and it will actually tell us the implications of those things. And it will tell you, in fact, the cost if you see down there at the bottom. It's good to tie your imagination back to the reality of what it actually costs. This is an amazing project, and Tiffany and Danny are happy to tell you more about it because I think you'll be seeing more of it. But it's signaling to people that we actually can hack these things, and it's giving people a language that they haven't had. We see more and more of these stories about things like bike lanes, and they are increasingly illustrated with screenshots from these apps. It's giving people the language to talk about the way we want to change the cities that we live in. So participation is an incredibly strong principle for civic design. And most recently, Sid pointed out to me another one that I didn't really understand. I'd seen this project, and I didn't see what she saw in it until she talked about it in the sense of unity. This also is out of Oakland, where I live, where the fellows last year were dealing with a true crisis in faith in our city hall and its ability to deal with public records. Living there, I can tell you this was genuinely very stressful. We had something called Occupy Oakland, and there were a bunch of records requests around it, and were not able to fill the records requests, and it wasn't because they didn't want to. It was because they didn't have any systems in place to deal with all of the influx of people asking for public records. But it's the law. If you do something called FOIA, Freedom of Information Act request, your government needs to give you that unless they have a really good reason why not. And so they created a system to be able to let citizens ask for the records that they wanted in a public manner. And what happens is everybody can see what record you have requested, which means that if you're requesting a record that someone else has already requested and it's been fulfilled, we don't have to handle that. You can just find that and use it. But it also means that if you say, you know, I want all of these emails between these two people in this time frame, or that's probably a bad example, but if you make a request that's not clear, and the person has to ask you a whole bunch of, on the other end, has to ask you a whole bunch of clarifying questions, you might later go, gosh, it took them 4 months to get that answer back, to deliver those records. And you can sort of tell that story as a failure of your government. But if you can actually see that they were going back and forth and saying, no, we actually need more information from you in order to be able to fulfill that request, then the experience on both sides is visible to everybody. And it really makes for a much more open and honest dialogue. So this has been a huge success. It's really fixed the problem. But the point that Sid made about it is that so often the system that the citizen sees and the back end that the system that the government worker is using are radically different. Let me show you a couple of these. When you go to the DMV and you're in line and you're pissed off and you're waiting, and you're going up to a counter, what you can't see is what is on that screen that person is looking at. These are screenshots of the software. This is pretty old now, that I asked fellows to take a couple years ago when they were in residency in their cities. I said, just show me the software that you are looking at. It looks like this. Here's a great one. It's got a drop-down menu, but there's nothing in it. If these were the tools that you were using every day, do you think that you would be incredibly efficient and happy? they also a lot look like this. I mean, I didn't pull this off the web. This is a picture of a green screen in New Orleans. There's green screens in a lot of cities. So when RecordTrack allows the people in government to use the same clean, simple, easy to use interface that the citizens are using, you have an experience of unity between the outside and the inside. And but more importantly, the next time you are in line or at a counter in a government place, please remember to ask if you can see the screen they're using. And if you can't, just remember to have a little bit of empathy for the experience that they're having on the government side. I said I was going to add a couple of principles to Sid's thing, and I think one would be relevance. I talked earlier about my experience of having data coming at me that the data I need coming at me without me even asking it all the time, whether it's Google Now or Uber. Your car is here. Fantastic, thank you. And Tiffany and Danny and the folks in Charlotte have worked on something that I think is really powerful and really clearly closes that gap between the expectations that we have now set in our private lives and what government can deliver using government data. There's a great video of it. Maybe we can send that link around, but I don't want to futz with video. So basically what CityGram will allow you to do, and it will allow you to do this once we get our open data policy here in Charlotte, because then this will connect to that data, is say, I, as a resident, need information. I can use information about my neighborhood, but it's very hard to say I want to know about public meetings and special events and restaurant complaints. Everybody wants to know about different things, and they want to know about it in different locations. So maybe for traffic accidents, you want to draw, and the system actually lets you draw a polygon saying, I want to hear about traffic accidents in that area. But maybe I want to know about restaurant openings around the entire city or in 4 different neighborhoods. Or maybe I want to know about new businesses in this other area. Well, you get to draw that polygon. You can say, yes, I'm happy with the area above, and then tell them either your email or your text or your phone number, and it'll say, it'll text you. And then you go up and sign up for a different area for a different set of notifications, which is pretty amazing. So I think this starts to look like the future of interfaces to government, and it looks like that because we're bringing a different set of skills and a different attunement to the needs of user experience to the table. I want to talk about a couple of others quickly. How much time do I have? I don't know where I am in this talk. But I promised to just give a brief shout out to something you should all be paying attention to, which is the Government Digital Service in the UK. They were dealing with the same problem that I was dealing with in federal government, which is there are literally thousands of government websites. They all overlap, they all have different user experience, they have different designs, and they are maintained at a very high cost. Actually, in federal government, we cannot tell you the number of websites because no one is actually effectively tracking them. But there are something like 1,400 federal.gov domains, off of which we think there are 30,000 to 50,000 websites. And what they did in the UK, it's obviously a user experience problem in a number of ways. Because the transactions also are so confusing, at a very high rate of failed transactions resulting in huge call center costs. Each user had to call the helpline an average of 7 times to get to the result that they were looking for, so it's across media. And what they decided to do was not to make a pretty website and port over all the content because the content wasn't getting us anywhere. They actually rewrote all of the content for all of those websites in language that's readable by a 9th grader, banning buzzwords, and making departments who had different things actually reconcile. So it's very streamlined, simple, clear, what you need to know about your government in the UK. Not what the government wants to tell you, but what you actually need to know. So in the past, you would have a page that would talk about VAT rates. That's that tax that you pay when you buy, your mom buys a Burberry coat when she's in London and gets the money back when she leaves. And this 20% rate would be buried in bunches and bunches of text. But what the designers in the government digital service there know is that 99.9% of people coming to that page just want to know the rate. So they put it in big letters, in big font at the top of the page. It's an amazing team there. They've really got the best and the brightest of the UK digital scene to come work in government, which is an amazing trick in of itself. And what's a wonderful lesson around this is that not only do you have happier users and more users, but it costs less. They're spending about a sixth what they used to spend to have better user interface. We're picking up that in federal government right now. This is the U.S. Digital Services Playbook that I worked on as part of the Digital Services Reform Agenda. And it is somewhat, it's very much derived from the principles, the user experience design principles of the government digital service in the UK, adapted for American use. A guy on O'Reilly Radar wrote a post about this saying, this isn't just a playbook for government. This is a playbook that works for pretty much everybody. It's really good. We are actually trying to align procurement policies to enable that. So I worked with the Office of Federal Procurement Policy to issue guidance about how to use contractors, because we still do mostly use contractors, to support an iterative customer-driven software development process, as is routinely done in the private sector. So this is pointing to a much more optimistic future, driven by a lot of inspiration, primarily from our friends at the local, what's happening at the local level and from overseas. But there's still a really enormous problem. And I want to return for a moment when I went to this thing that we have all experienced with the failure of healthcare.gov. I had a moment when I was looking at those terrible news articles and stressing out, when I remembered a blog post that I'd read a couple of years ago, written by a guy named Tom Steinberg, who has a sort of Code for America-ish, actually much predating Code for America, nonprofit in the UK. And Tom wrote an article memorializing a colleague of his who had unfortunately died, but a guy who had a brilliant young polymath, really. He was obviously a web developer, but did so many other things. And what he was trying to say is that this man could have done anything with his life. Incredibly talented. But he had chosen to spend his life working on interfaces to government, working on civic technology. And he wanted people to remember this guy because he says what Chris fundamentally had right was the understanding that you could no longer run a country properly if the elites didn't understand technology in the way that they grasp economics or ideology. And his analysis and predictions about what would happen if elites couldn't learn were savage and depressingly accurate. Now, this was written in 2012, so a year before healthcare.gov failed, but I felt like he was speaking to that crisis that was coming. He could see that we were going to be at a place where we could no longer govern because we can't implement through digital channels. And he goes on to say that the idea of good governance and what good governance and good society look like is now inextricably linked to an understanding of the digital. And I think what I'm trying to say to you guys is that the future of interfaces to government, A, is very important, and B, is inextricably linked to people like you caring about it and doing something about it. People like you have a skill that we desperately need to bring into this environment, which is a skill of, actually, maybe let me say it this way, what Mike Bracken has, big poster over his desk, show the thing, make something. Let's get it going. When you show the thing, when you mock something up, when you have a prototype, we get out of these deadly waterfall practices that killed healthcare.gov, and we actually start making things that people can play with and iterating on them, and you bring to the table that ability to iterate, which is another way of saying making the user experience for the people of our country just a little bit better every day. That's what we need. It's not some silver bullet. It's like when they asked the guys to go fix healthcare.gov, they really thought that they were going to find like some flaw. We would fix that flaw and it would be done. We needed a more server. There was some configuration problem. It's much deeper than that. What they did was they spent 6 months working 18-hour days just looking at the data, listening to users, and making it a little bit better every day. It's a slog, but it's a really important slog. This is how we express our sort of vision statement at Code for America. Government can work, full stop. Government can work, hello. It can work for the people, by the people in the 21st century if we make it so. We don't mean we at Code for America, we mean we the people. But another way of saying it, since we're talking to a lot of people who care about experiences, it's government can work for people, real people. those people who are at the front of the checkout counter and their EBT card doesn't work. By the people who show up for Code for America brigades. I stole this quote from Tiffany, people ignore design that ignores people. Well, we have been ignoring the design of government for far too long, and the consequences are savage and depressing, but they're also hopeful. Government can work if we make it so. So if you want to make it so, what do? First thing you should do, who here lives in or near Charlotte? You should be part of the Charlotte Brigade. No questions, right? Enormous, great things happening there. And the first thing you should be doing is being very aware that your city is struggling with the choice about an open data policy right now. Almost all of the things I showed require there to be open data. Certainly CityGram does. But so much of this notion of by the people can only happen if the people can look at the data and make that data relevant to people at the time that they need it. Again, Charlotte Brigade table right outside, no excuses. Some of you should probably also consider going to work with federal government. The United States Digital Service is our answer to the GDS in London. It's run by an amazing guy named Mikey Dickerson. It's the thing I went to federal government to help stand up. I'm very proud of it. And it's going to be the way that we have another healthcare.gov, the way that we don't fail in the implementation of the next important policies. And if you're interested in talking about that, please reach out to me at jen@codeforamerica.org. But also, a lot of you should consider doing the Code for America Fellowship. We'll be opening our applications around the beginning of next year. We've got a lot of great cities. Well, we've got great cities signed up for 2015, but those guys are chosen, so think about it for 2016. This is just 3 of the ways that you can do good, feel great about what you're doing, and again, have a fantastic time. Remember the fun part of it. But there's a million other things that you can do, and please don't let these ideas limit your imagination. The important thing is to remember that it isn't someone else's job, because we didn't build our government that way. We built it for the people, by the people. So please come make it work. And thanks so much for having me here.